Hello, God bless you. It's an interesting story. It might be quite long. I hope it won't be, but I need to try and fit everything in. I feel inspired by the Lord to talk about this. It's been a long time coming. I think a lot of people would like to know more of my story. I gave an overview years ago, like 2016 or something, of my kind of general testimony, but I'm going to go deeper and I'm going to go pretty specific on certain subjects. If the title of the video is what I am thinking it's going to be right now, you probably guessed what I'm mainly going to talk about. So let's begin there. My past was promiscuous and adventurous as well, and unpredictable, erratic, some might say, and sometimes just stupid. Like, I did some very, very stupid things in my life. Not to mention, you know, experimentation with drugs, parties, alcohol, all sorts of different attempts to try and satiate a hole in my soul that I always knew was there, and that grew the more and more I sinned, and I didn't realize that it was getting worse and worse and worse. I was actually a very happy child until I hit my teens, pretty much, and I started to listen to basically what I consider evil music now. And it did dictate a lot of how I saw the world. Those people were preaching into my subconscious. They were, you know, as I lay there in bed at night listening to a lot of that music, I literally was being fed their demonic inspiration as to how to live life. And it did involve parties and drugs and girls and all of that, you know, but there was also this real, like, sense of disparity and depression, basically. A lot of that music that I used to listen to, basically grunge, and even, you know, 70s bands that I used to listen to, like Led Zeppelin or whatever, always had this vibe of like dark, something dark, you know, and I fed on that. I liked it at the time, but little did I know it was ruining me. And as I travelled the world and was trying to satiate myself, basically, with whatever it was, and sex was one of those things, and I was looking for someone. I was looking for that someone, just like everybody else, right? I do believe everybody is looking for that someone, but for me, like, there was a lot more fun in kind of, especially when you've had your heart broken, to be the heartbreaker, you know. And I definitely played both sides of that. I had my heart broken, and I was also a heartbreaker as well, in some kind of revenge sometimes, you know, but also just because it was fun, you know. Like, I've been guilty of all sorts of different horrible things in that way. I've played girls off each other, you know, and got caught, you know, just trying to, I don't know, basically, when you do things like that, life suddenly becomes very, very exciting in the wrong way. You know what I mean? And if you get it wrong, you definitely know about it. You feel like such an idiot, and I have been there. But I bring that up simply to say that, like, all my life I was basically looking for what I found in the Lord. And that fateful day, I'm going to call it a fateful day, I believe that, you know, the Lord had been seeking me out for a long time before that, and I had got close, but I hadn't really understood at all what anything was about. And at that psychedelic trance festival, when I met him for the first time, I knew that everything I needed was in him, and everything I wanted was in him, and he satisfied me in that way. And as I mentioned in that first testimony, there was a girl who I really, really liked in New Zealand, who suddenly was there in England. And I do believe it was an astral projection of one of Satan's servants. I knew she was a high-powered witch, and the odds of her being there were so slim. You know, my enemies will mention I was high, maybe it was a hallucination. Look, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. I reckon I had that opportunity when I first met the Lord. Satan straight away got in there and he was like, I'm going to make you trip up by something that's always made you trip up, which is a beautiful girl telling you to go to bed, basically. And this girl, like, she was very, very good looking, and the look was one of, like, ultimate seduction, which I now know to be a spirit of Jezebel. But I laughed it off. I laughed that off. And I'm so glad I did, because I would have been in real trouble if I had, you know, suddenly just straight away backstabbed and betrayed the Lord. But also, you know, gone with what were my lusts. But that day marked an end to, like, something that had been always very prominent in my life since being a teenager, which was a very lusty outlook on the world. And my explorations into the occult only strengthened that. Anyone who's read, like, the Da Vinci Code or something, you know, starts to see these signs everywhere, like, you know, the chalice and the, you know, the pyramid in it. I don't know, everything became sexual as I looked more and more into the occult, which is obvious because it's doctrines of demons, and lust is a demon, you know. So anyway, there were many girls who I actually did kind of fall in love with, who I literally did spend way more time with than anybody else during that period of time. And some of them were good and some of them were not good. Sorry if you're one of those girls watching. But yeah, it only strengthened my lack, I guess, a distrust, and my resolve just to get what I want out of it, which ultimately was just a climax, right? And shun family life, I also had, like, this innate fear of, like, being a father, basically, and doing that whole thing, which I now know to be the most wonderful blessing. Everybody who has children, even though it's very hard work, and I think anyone who's a parent knows that, knows how worth it is. And ultimately, real love is about sacrifice and servitude. And you have both of those with children. You are a servant for the rest of your life. And it's a massive sacrifice. You give up everything that your life could have been, and suddenly you are a slave to these, you know, infants who need your help, right? And I always had a fear of that. And I had like an evil fear of that when I was, you know, a reprobate before I knew Christ, simply because that would have just, you know, stopped me from doing whatever I was doing, which was traveling the world, you know, rock and roll kind of lifestyle and having fun, basically. But after I met Christ, the fear changed. It was still a fear. I don't know. I don't think it was a godly fear, but it's still kind of there, if I'm honest, which is I feared to have, like, a family, because I knew I was called to give my life. Even if, you know, it was today, I could give my life. And the fear was twofold: to bring in children into this wicked, horrible world that I've always really not liked. Like, I love everything God's done, but everything mankind has done, no, it sucks. Not everything, but, like, a lot of it. You know, like, I'm a country boy. I've never liked cities. It has to be an exceptionally nice city for me to even think, you know, it's worth my time. But I love trees and flowers and rivers and all of that. But yeah, nice buildings and stuff are impressive for a day or something, but after a while, it's just not my thing. the middle of London's like a, you know, it's like torment for me. I hate it, you know. But anyway, that's one fear, bringing children into this world in the first place. And the second fear, me being called to literally have to give up my life and maybe even watch them die as well, which has happened to a lot of Christians around the world. Like, you are persecuted and then your family gets involved because you're a Christian, you're the head of the household, and there have been circumstances where evil people have slaughtered someone's children and wife before they kill them, kind of thing, all because they love Christ, you know. And so I guess there was a third fear, the third fear being that the Lord is literally coming back very soon. He literally said that to me audibly when I first came to the Lord, and I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing at the time. And when he told me, he was angry, you know, but he basically said, I'm coming back very soon. And it was serious, and it literally stopped me, what I was doing, and I never did it again. It was a sin, you know, and I never did it again. It wasn't sexual, by the way. It was something else. It was to do with drugs, actually. And I never did it again when he said that. And since then, I have to tell you something more about my testimony. About when I first came to the Lord, I didn't know any Christians. Only one who was my best friend at secondary school, but we were kind of estranged, and at that time. And I didn't know anybody when I first met the Lord, really. And I didn't know anything about demons, didn't know that I was, because of my New Age practices and involvements, was full to the brim, like Legion, you know, like the man with Legion, the Gadarene man. And they raged within me. They absolutely raged. When they found out I was serious about Christ, my life literally turned to hell. Like, there was a kind of honeymoon period, maybe of about a month or something, where I knew the Lord and I knew his presence, but I didn't know. I still had a girlfriend at that time, my last girlfriend. We were still going out, and even after I met Christ, he didn't there and then, when I first met him, like, tell me to repent or anything like that. You'd have to go and look at the other testimony to see what happened, but it wasn't long until the demons in me started to rage. I'll call them evil spirits, whatever you want to call them. And I was literally sent loopy. There was a time I went to a festival in Rome about a month later with my girlfriend and other friends, and I ended up on the streets of Rome like a raving lunatic, basically. Completely demonized to the max. And when I look back at it now, I just, you know, sadly, I think what heightened it, and this might not be popular with people who are Catholics, but I literally went to the Vatican to visit after the festival, and it was that day, that evening, that I came back very, very demonized and basically went crazy. And what happened was something that reoccurred for years after, which was I would literally go AWOL, absent without leave, and tell nobody where I was going, and literally go off on these jaunts, you know, attempting, in my head at least, to follow what the Lord wanted me to do. But because there was so much confusion in me, and these evil spirits were speaking, and they can imitate God's voice very well, and I'll get onto that, by the way, because that actually is partly something I want to talk about. They were causing me to do very erratic things that got me into a lot of trouble, basically. I've been arrested. I ran around our local town naked. What else have I done? I've done some very stupid things, you know, erratic things, things that you would only attribute to someone who's insane. And thankfully, all of that stopped after I read a certain book. I mentioned it in my first testimony, which was Hidden Curses by Rebecca Brown. I'd already read They Came to Set the Captives Free, and I bought that book, and I prayed the prayers in the back of that very sincerely on my knees. And that evening I got deliverance from my first ever deliverance, proper deliverance. Years later, after my first encounter with the Lord, I got proper deliverance there and then at night. It was an amazing experience in every way. I literally was lying there in bed, woke up and my mouth was open, like really as wide as it could ever be, and these spirits were literally like they were making a noise, you know, like it was literally like a freight train out of my mouth, you know. And after that, my mother will testify to this, I have been normal ever since then. Well, vaguely normal for me anyway, which, you know, I will always probably carry some creative abnormality with me, because I am an artistic, empathetic, emotional person in some kind of way, and I like to express that prophetically sometimes, and when I say prophetically, I mean I identify with someone like Ezekiel, who had to lie on his side for like days on end, and then the other side for days on end, and everybody thought it was crazy, you know, like not to that extreme, but I'm not afraid to do that kind of abstract, weird, prophetic move if I'm led to do so by the Lord, right? But these things were insane, and afterwards, after I got that deliverance, I was in my right mind, like sat there like the Gadarene demoniac after Jesus had literally commanded everything out. I was like that, you know, and people, you know, my mother feared. She definitely feared. I saw it in her face when I came down after that evening. She knew I'd had like a proper experience, I think. So anyway, that was a very powerful thing. But around that kind of time, I made like some kind of real commitment to the Lord in a totally different way, which I'll get onto now. So the way that the Lord spoke to me during those times was very prophetically. All of my art at the moment, a lot of it comes from that time. Like it's gradually become more intense, and has filled out over the time where the Lord's revealed more and more. But generally, like a lot of the inceptions of my creativity, my artistic ideas, and really the fundamental point of my life now is the idea of the death of death, and that really is the focus of a lot of my art and music generally, books, whatever else. Because this really is the gospel. The good news is that death has been conquered and we can go free through the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. So I made like a real commitment over those years. Before I got that major deliverance, I'd become more and more disgusted with what I had done in my life, and I've done some foul things, and you know, he who has been forgiven much loves much, and I feel like I can testify to the fact that I love way more than I ever did before. And I try to manifest that in ways that I always used to be the opposite to. So for example, I used to be a skinflint and a blackguard and you know, very tight with money. And now I'm literally carefree with money to the point, to a fault really. Sometimes I have to watch myself because I get carried away, but generally I don't care nearly as much about money as I used to, and I try to be as much of a cheerful giver as I can, not just financially but time-wise and whatever else, and I attribute all of that to the Lord. He gets all the credit for it. He's the one who has led me that way. But during that time, in that kind of disgust at myself, remembering all these old sins, I literally, like, whether it was righteous or not, it doesn't sound righteous when I say it now, but at the time it seemed righteous, like in a kind of like sacrificial way. I literally kind of said to the Lord, like spiritually, just cut it off. You know what I mean? Because that thing had literally been something that had got me into, well, it literally almost took me to hell. That lust spirit in me was massive. And when it finally came out, I mean, there are like other spirits that are strong men. Lust is a strong man, but it's not the strongest, you know. But that lust spirit, when it came out, it totally transformed my life. And And I was empowered to basically live this life of, you know, total celibacy for the last 15 years. And this is where I want to come into, because one of the reasons I'm still single at 42, it's not choice really. It's first and foremost, I wanted to honor the Lord by, if he wants me to, in the 1 Corinthians 7 admonition, encouragement, or, you know, recommendation, however you want to look at it, to give up all of that. And the thing is, he knows that I know it's all worth giving up for, and that's the other thing. Like, I know his presence really well, and I know it's all worth giving up for. And so, coupled with this disgust that I have for myself for what I have done in my life, I have found it probably easier than most, especially with the deliverance aspect, to shun you know, women who've approached me for like potential relationship or anything to do with like illicit sex. I mean, that's obvious, you know, like no masturbation, no porn or anything like that, never, you know. But there have been women in my life who've approached me who are very beautiful, intelligent, and they love the Lord, right? This is where I'm going to get to, because I often think of the Lord Jesus Christ as surely he was a very, I mean, he does say in Isaiah that nothing was attractive about him, but I know that women especially would have been a source of, you know, they would have wanted to be very close to him. That's what I'm trying to say. And when you are close with the opposite sex, it is easy to suddenly develop feelings for each other, right? It happens time and time again. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of pastors fall, for example, because when you're ministering and you minister one-on-one with the opposite sex and you're talking about very, very deep things, that's very easy for a man of God to be tempted by and fall, even if they're married, right? And so for me, like, knowing all of this stuff, it's always been fairly easy up until this point to kind of basically shun what the flesh wants, right? Because the flesh always wants that, always desires that communion, I guess. Like the sexual act is a communion. And because we are so far removed from how it was always meant to be, and people are so lost and loveless as well, that to find that kind of connection with someone is a very desirable thing, right? And it's not evil, by the way. Like Paul does say, you know, never forbid marriage. And he also says, if you do want to marry, you're not going to sin. You know what I mean? So it is something very beautiful. It's been ordained from the start. And I'm totally down with it. Like, whatever the Lord wants, I'm definitely in there if that's what he wants. But ultimately, that's the point. What does the Lord want, right? So when I look back at my life, I kind of think, well, I've put my foot in it so many times, I don't even deserve it. I don't even deserve my next heartbeat or my next breath, let alone, like, you know, a very, I don't know, you know, a loving wife and a lovely family and all of that. Up until now, I've been like with the mentality of a soldier. You know, like a soldier goes into battle, the wife or whatever, it doesn't matter in the heat of battle. That's where we're at. This is a spiritual war, right? And I've been ready to, having counted the cost, like Jesus told us to. I'm ready to go today if I have to. You know. As much as I love this place, like, I definitely feel like I'm at a place now where I can just go whenever. And obviously when you go, you leave everybody else behind, including like people who are dependent on you, right? So that's another fear, I guess, like the conflict, the battle of like wanting to serve and love people who are very close to you, even from your own body, right? Like children. And wanting to serve the Lord, obviously, who is greater and deserves all the attention. And, you know, the ultimate price must be paid for him if he requires it. So all of these conflicts, I guess, have been raging in me ever since, really. I finally said goodbye to that last girlfriend in 2006, I think it was, so 15 years ago. And ever since then, I've been trying to keep myself from being corrupted and living a holy life, which is what we're admonished to do. Now, there was an experience I had, that I thought I had at least. And here's where I want to confess some kind of weakness. Like, when did people ever confess weakness? Like, I'm just going to be that person. You know, like, I am weak. And you have to understand that I don't really want people to look up to me in any kind of way other than, you know, as a brother who's also been through that and can maybe give you some kind of advice. I love that proverb. Evangelism is basically one beggar telling another beggar where to get bread, right? And I feel like that right now because I know I'm not the only weak one. We're all weak, you know? But regardless of that, I'm going to expose my weakness by saying that in many ways, the things that I've desired in the past have always come back to bite me. You know, like what I've wanted hasn't been right. And in the past, especially, well, before I was a Christian, I had terrible taste in women, like literally Jezebel incarnate, just like the hippie version. You know what I mean? The nymphomaniac type, the fast and easy, let's just get it on type, you know. And even though I did have kind of long-ish relationships, they were always short compared to other people, you know. And it never really lasted. Apart from anything else, I had emotional torments of my own that always seemed to manifest when I was around other people because I wasn't settled inside, you know. And obviously when you're intensely living with a girlfriend or whatever, those demons are going to manifest at some point. Not to mention their demons, you know, working off each other. And it never just seemed to work, never. And I praise the Lord and thank him for that because, you know, that a lot of those girls I could have ended up having children with or whatever, and it would have just been disastrous, to be honest with you. So anyway, regardless of that, it had been years, let's say 8 years since I got, you know, saved from the bondage of sin at the psychedelic trance festival. At least when I met the Lord Jesus Christ, he started to reveal his kingdom himself to me. And I had already been to Africa once in 2008, and I felt the call of the Lord to go back there. He actually asked me to go back, and it was for a musical reason apart from anything else. Also to go and visit my friend's orphanage. And just before I left there, sometimes the Lord speaks audibly to me, and sometimes he says something in my spirit. And in my spirit, it literally stopped me dead in my tracks. I was walking to the bathroom, had the towel on my, you know, on my shoulder, you know, no top on, just boxers, just heading to, you know, quickly because my house was very cold, and it was like, you know, early spring. So, you know, briskly walking, and it literally stopped me dead in my tracks because I literally heard him say, in my spirit though, not audibly, for some reason this girl flicked into my head. Now this girl I'd met just as I'd become a Christian, and it was just maybe like a year later or something after I'd made a commitment to Christ, had turned away, you know, from drinks and no more drugs, nothing like that. I'd kind of resigned myself to kind of go into myself and seek the Lord, meditate. And I met this girl, and she became part of our little group. And she really was the first person I ever really loved. without the lust aspect. Like, she's very pretty, very smart, very creative, artistic like me. And we had this, like, over that summer, like a small kind of like platonic relationship, I'll call it, where it was easy to hug her and be around her, and, you know, we used to curl up together on like the sofa or whatever, but it was platonic, you know what I mean? It was just friends, because I think she knew that, like, I wasn't looking for that kind of thing, and she was very young at the time. I was quite young, but she was much younger, like still in her teens, I think, or early 20s. And I knew she was going to go traveling, and I probably would never see her again for like 5 years or something, because she had that, you know, desire to go. So it was always this like platonic thing. Now, the day before she left, like, something happened. Like, she was looking at me in a way, and she was at the top of the stairs, I was at the bottom of the stairs. I asked her a question of some kind. I don't really remember what happened, but the way she looked at me was, are you going to make a move? And I basically was like, no, I'm not. Because I didn't want to, not because I didn't like her or anything, but because I didn't want to limit her. I knew she had already bought her ticket. And I think she was basically saying, are you going to do something or not? And I was like, no. I grant you freedom, if you like. You know, I mean, that sounds so... That's how it felt for me. Whether it was like that for her, I don't know. But I felt like, no, you go and do your thing. I'm trying to work out my own thing here at the moment with the Lord, you know. Now, that basically was the end of that. She went away for years. She came back with she met someone in New Zealand, this French guy, and very cool guy, you know, like really liked him. And, you know, every so often they would they went back to live in France, but they would come back here every so often. And I never wanted to impinge on that. Now, this specific instance I'm telling you about, the Lord basically brought her to mind. Like, she literally flashed into my mind, and he said, well, I think it was him anyway, and I'm convinced. I'm literally convinced it was him, even now. He said, she is your wife, right? Now, this kind of laid the foundation for this next 8 years. That was 2013, right? We're in 2021. Now, I'm a very loyal, stubborn person, right? That wasn't the only time. This is the strange thing. Like, this wasn't the only time he said that. And I have to emphasize, like, I've never ever lusted after this girl. Like, I just never, it just doesn't cross my mind. You know what I mean? Like, I really truly like love her as a friend, and that's it, you know? So it was like a very unusual thing. He'll testify that I've pondered this in my heart, like Mary, you know, like many times, these things, you know, like, why this, you know? Why is it like this? She's not even a Christian. I don't understand, you know? That's the other thing. She's not a Christian. Not even today as I sit here, she's not a Christian, right? And I would never marry a non-Christian. I wouldn't even marry someone who I didn't think was born again. They might consider themselves Christians, right? So that's where we're at right now. And that's the reason why, after all these years, I'm still single, right? Now, you might just think, well, you can't base your whole thing on just one event, right? Well, this is the thing. There have been multiple events where he's shown me that he at least approves of the way that I behold this lady in my head, you know, if nothing else. Like, I remember, for example, I picked her up. She needed a lift one time. I picked her up, and we've always been good friends, and it was just straight back into that friendship. And when I gave her, like, you know, in our culture, we hug everybody, right? Before coronavirus, that was. And, you know, when I dropped her off at her parents, she literally gave me a hug, and I felt the presence of the Lord so strong. Another time, we went for a long walk just as a big group of us, and her boyfriend was there from France. And then we went back, and we had this party kind of thing. And all this time, the Lord knew that, like, I knew, or at least I thought I knew, that this girl was potentially later down the line going to be someone who was important to me in a different way that she is now, you know, in a more intense way. And nevertheless, when it came to talking with her boyfriend or whatever, I was just totally normal. And then we even hugged and, you know, kind of like high five and, yes mate, you're a cool guy and whatever. The Lord showed me that he really liked that, you know. There are other times where he's shown me that this is the way that at least I've handled this has been, something he's approved of. And I've always kind of thought, well, I'm a very stubborn person. Like, if I feel like the Lord has told me something about someone, I'm just going to do it, you know. And there have been other people since then, like several people who have like wanted to start something with me, and I've just been like, I'm really sorry, I can't. Aside from the fact that I feel like I'm a soldier and I'm trying to do the Lord's will at the moment, just by simply focusing on the spiritual war. Because the thing is, if you get married, you compromise. That's just the bottom line. You compromise. You can't put the same amount of time in to the Lord's kingdom as someone who's totally like focused on the mission at hand, right? Which is what I have also been doing, which is why I am very productive in many ways, like to do with music or art, books, ministry, whatever else, right? I can work a full-time job, come home, and then pray for people at night, right? You know, there's pros and cons to both lives, basically, because in Ecclesiastes, it's good for men to not be alone, right? For man not to be alone, but also, you know, when you have someone by you, they can help you. And, you know, it's not just the intimacy aspect, it's, you know, the practical aspect. You know, if I come home from work, there might be supper there for me, or my washing might be done, or whatever, you know what I mean? So anyway, where was I going with that? This prospect, let's say this prospect became more and more less feasible, let's put it that way, less feasible over the years, but because of certain parables, I guess, or parables that I took from stories in the Bible that I feel applied to the situation, I, even though sometimes it was very difficult to do so, stubbornly gritted my teeth and just got through it, thinking, whatever the Lord wants, he can have, you know, even if it means I never am with this girl, like I'm literally just gonna see that through what he wants, right? And so one of those stories, you might remember in the Old Testament, that obviously Abram, who became Abraham, when he didn't listen to the Lord about the child of the promise, and he listened to his wife, slept with his concubine, and then, you know, then we had Ishmael, basically, and that whole Hagar thing, which became like a parable later down the line in Romans, whatever. I'm sure, you know, it was preordained to be that way in many ways, but you know, when you don't listen to the Lord, when you just want to do your own thing, like everything works out for the good of those who love God, and I do believe it would all work out for the best. But a bit like King David, when he ultimately he sinned, he murdered his very good friend just so he could have that guy's wife, right? Yet still, God called him a man after his own heart, and marrying those two is quite difficult, but I think I know why. It's because we can do very presumptuous, stupid things and not even realize how evil we're being, and yet the Lord still knows that you will repent in a godly way when he points it out. But I've always been afraid to get to even that situation where I'm like having to repent for something that ultimately I probably should have just stuck my guns. And this is the situation I'm talking about. That's why at 42 I'm still single, because there's always been this expectancy where I've had to basically shun other people who are definitely, you know, of interest in that way, but cannot be considered because of what God has ordained, as far as I'm concerned, right? Now, one of the issues is that over the years, there have been a lot of people who've said, dude, seriously? Like, you might have heard God, like, in other times, but I'm pretty sure you've got this wrong, you know? And I'm going to be honest with you right now, even before the Lord, as he's standing here, I'm starting to doubt myself. And not that I'm doubting myself about my interpretation about what he said, rather than doubting that I heard him. Does that make sense? Like, there have been other times in my life, and here's more weakness that I'm going to expose. And you know, I'll probably never be a credible prophet for this reason, right? Is because I have, like, said I've heard the Lord about certain things, and actually I did hear the Lord, but it wasn't actually what I interpreted it to be, and I ended up looking really stupid. I looked really stupid, and one of those things was this whole Hebrew roots thing. Like, I'd never heard about it, and in like 2015 or something like that, it came to my attention. The apostle sent me over someone who was very heavily into that, basically to help get me to help him come out of it. And then that guy ended up persuading me about the Hebrew roots, very briefly, I might add. And thank God that, you know, like, I got answers to that. But that was a whole, like, period of my life where that was inspired, because when I first started to look into it, I very strongly felt the Lord's presence. And I assumed that he was, like, showing me that this is the way he wanted me to go. Whereas now, in hindsight, because he also showed me his presence in a totally different way when I really, really was truly seeking answers on that, that he is, like, that Hebrew roots, like, mentality is nothing to do with his kingdom, actually. And, like, we have freedom to eat whatever we want, etc., right? And wear what we want, and whatever else, right? And so that was a very liberating experience for me. But that initial experience of his presence, I assumed meant that whoever was speaking to me at the time, because it happened while this guy was talking to me, that he was right. And actually, it was about something totally different. Like, the Lord, it was like the grace of the Lord for me to, like, go through that whole thing, find out what it was all about, live a miserable existence for a few weeks, like, attempting to keep a Sabbath and not eat things I like pork, you know what I mean? And yeah, thank God that ended. But basically, that made me less credible to certain people, obviously, because I was adamant for that time. No, I felt the presence of the Lord, it must be right, you know, blah blah blah. This could be another, like, thing after all these years, and this is where I'm going to look really stupid, right, in front of everybody. And I've reached the point where I just literally don't care anymore. Like, what anybody thinks of me. Like, all I know is that I definitely heard a voice say that, right? I felt the presence of the Lord around this situation to do with this girl many times. You know, there have been circumstances where I have literally been in a scenario where we've been able to talk about Christianity, and I found out that she really doesn't want it. You know what I mean? That was fairly recently as well, like maybe within the last, I don't know, 2 years or something. And ever since then, over the whole coronavirus thing, like, I found out that she finally split up with that man, the Frenchman that she met in New Zealand. And for me, this was like, hang on a minute, is this the Lord? Like, you know, like, she told me out of the blue, she messaged me, or there was some kind of interaction, found out, and I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. She'd been with him like over 10 years or something. And I thought that this was the time. right? This happened like fairly recently, right? And I actually made a kind of video about the result, right? The video to faith, which I put up, that was the response I had to finding out that she basically went out of the frying pan into the fire, if you know what I mean. She found another guy straight away. Maybe even the reason she left that guy in the first place, I don't know any more than that, right? But that interim where I didn't know what was happening, and all I knew that, like, she told me she wasn't with him anymore, and she told me specifically, and I was like, okay, well then maybe this is going to happen, you know what I mean? So yeah, that has now been like another kind of, I guess, what some people might call a failed prophecy, you know what I mean? I guess it still could potentially happen, but I'll tell you what, I've reached the point now where I'm literally like, do you know what, it's been 8 years since I heard about that, and like, if I was to look at the fruit of everything that's happened so far with her, like, I don't think she'll ever come to a knowledge of the truth at the moment, unless God does something remarkable in her life. Like, she's chosen like a worldly route, she knows the gospel, etc. For me, like, the fruit is like, okay, like I can be very productive, I guess, and whatever else, but I'm starting to get to the point, not that I'm really looking for like family still because of all the fears I mentioned, but even though I know family's good and whatever else, I don't want to let the Lord down. I want to still be a soldier, be intense for his kingdom, whatever. But more so, like, I just feel like I kind of need a helper. You know what I mean? Ultimately, that's why God gave Eve to Adam in the first place, right? She was meant to be a helper, like to basically serve him, you know? As unpopular as that might be to like worldly ears, right? That's basically why women were created, basically, in the first place, from his rib, like bone of his bone and whatever else, right? Was to help, to serve. And that's the most noble thing as well. Like, people seem to get the idea that to serve is like to be underneath, to be the lower, to be the minion or whatever. That's how they see it. But actually, we serve the servant king. He serves us ultimately. Like, we might think we serve him. It's not that way. He serves us at every given moment, all the time. And if we want to be like him, we are, you know, also to be like servants, right? And so it's a very noble thing, maybe even a greater thing, to be, you know, to serve, I guess, the master of the house, right? The women of old called their husband Lord, you know, whether it was David or Abraham, whatever, that each of their wives called them Lord, right? And there is that aspect that of the hierarchy in Christ, you know, God is the head of Christ, Christ is the head of man, man is the head of women, you know. And so if that person is a man of God, like for a woman, they should see him as Lord, you know what I mean, in that sense. Like, we are to love the church, that our wives as Christ loves the church. You see what I mean? And so ultimately, even though women might feel like they're like to serve and help and whatever else, actually it should secretly be the other way around for men. Like, we should be serving behind the scenes. Does that make sense? Even if we think we have authority and lord it over, and, you know, have that, you know, status, hierarchy, status, whatever, spiritual hierarchy. It's such an unpolitically correct phrase, isn't it? But anyway, regardless of that, like, I feel like I've got to this point now where I'm literally like, okay, I'm prepared to be wrong, you know, like I don't mind looking like an idiot. Why is that? It's because I think I could probably, I feel like I've mastered like living on my own. I feel like I've mastered, I think if the Lord required it of me, which he might still do, I could live a celibate life the rest of my life. Like, I feel like I really know how to deal with those situations whenever the temptations come, and they do come, by the way. but still there is this thing in me, and I think it's in all human beings, that it's not good for man to be alone, you know. And so I'm willing to be wrong now, and the reason I'm making this public in a video is because I have told so many people, like, there is no way I'm going to ever deviate from what I feel like God has told me. Like I said, I'm very stubborn, especially when I feel like God has told me something, right? And I do feel like he's told me something. I don't know why he like used that phrase and what it means for my life, but and maybe it still does mean that might happen. I don't know. I just don't know what's going on in that sense. But I want to come here and be candid and frank, basically, that, you know, whilst I'm happy as I am, there are like doubts I have now, especially when people I respect are telling me, dude, you are so wrong about this. Like, you are literally possibly even in danger of putting words in God's mouth that he never said, which horrifies me, you know. Like, I wouldn't want to ever do that, like make the mistake that I had an evil spirit perhaps, or back in those days I still needed a lot of deliverance, you know. I was still working things out, doing silly things as well. So it's a possibility. I guess I'm gonna put it there, like, even though I'm adamant, I still could be wrong. So just so people don't get the wrong idea, this isn't some kind of like glorified like dating site advert or something. Like, I'm not looking for anybody, you know. But what I want to confess is, first of all, weakness. Like, I really don't see hardly anybody doing this, like who has any kind of platform. They never confess their weaknesses, you know. Look, I have got it wrong so many times, and I'm prepared to admit that, you know. Maybe this is wrong. Like, after all that, you know, like, I've turned down, you know, some people who really, like, I really thought were excellent people, you know, and they love God, and it's because of this issue, you know. And also the other fears that I told you about, you know. Like, I don't want to be in a position where, like, everything goes completely, you know, apocalyptic, basically, and I've got these, like, I've got mouths to feed and you know, to look after a wife, when actually what I need to be doing is going out telling everybody not to take the mark of the beast and stuff like that, you know, and then possibly even going to Jerusalem, or you know, setting my face like flint in a kind of prophetic sense, you know, like Jesus did, like basically going, right, this is the end, and let's go out with a bang here, you know. When you have, like, you know, those kind of family responsibilities, those actions are way harder to implement, and I am afraid to kind of like limit myself in that way, you know, and become someone who is depended upon, you know. When you're kind of like a lone ranger soldier, a bit like a sniper, you can kind of go off and do your own thing, and you know, in a totally different sense. And I still want to be open to the Lord to be that type of soldier. I have been kind of like that, especially recently, although I have come under the umbrella, obviously, of a particular church now, and I'm more than happy to do so. It is the most powerful church, at least online, that I've seen. You know, in the public eye, I don't know of any other church that's doing what we do at BDS. So, and you know, I'm under leadership myself, and I take advice, and I listen to wisdom. You know, I love wisdom, and when people correct me, like, I would like to deeply consider it. And I have been challenged about what I'm talking about to you right now, which is really the result. This video is the result of those conversations. Like, not just the apostle, but other trusted brothers who I've spoken to about this whole scenario, who are literally like, maybe you just need to rethink this whole thing, you know. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at right now. And a week tomorrow is my birthday. I'm going to be 42. I think if I was ever to have a family, it would have to be around this kind of time, because, you know, obviously you don't want to have children when you're really old. It's like, I've seen people who have children who they themselves are really old, and by the time their kids are like 18, they're in their like 70s, you know what I mean? So I don't want to be one of those people. It really is like a make or break situation now, but it's all in the Lord's hands, and that's the point. I don't want to disobey him. I want to put it out there publicly that I could possibly, for the last 8 years, have been totally wrong about this, you know. And I think a lot of people will be going, yes, you are. You are, you know. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, realistically, looking at that scenario at the moment, it's just not going to happen. Like my cherished, beloved brother, who is I work with as a painter. He literally said to me, "Stop being a bonehead about this. She's never gonna, like, she'll never come to the Lord. You know, you just need to move on with your life." And I don't know what that looks like. It might remain the same as it is in some kind of way, but at least I'm kind of going to, unless I'm led by the Lord, otherwise I'm literally going to be more open to the fact that I've been wrong about this whole thing, and see what happens.